record.
All right, I'm asking my son to get off his Switch for now.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. So how did this session, how does it work? Do members or people participating in the conference, do they sign up to join, or anyone can join as long as they have the I guess the link and the passcode?
I think anyone with the passcode could join. We didn't let anybody know outside of the, outside of Crowd Compass, the conference itself, except for our two panelists who are not ASB attendees, but, and we are still waiting for Celeste. Okay. Oh, there's Celeste, perfect.
Hey.
Hi there, welcome.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. I'm a little bit early. Cool.
So Nelson, are you a PhD student, a postdoc?
Yes, PhD candidate.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
What's your focus?
My focus is on understanding stability and fatigue in runners. So as people start, trying to understand how their movement starts to mirror that of people who are running with an emphasis on stability.
Yeah, nice.
Last year.
Are you been able to collect data, or have you been slowed down with the whole COVID thing?
We were slowed down, but I just finished my data collections 2 weeks ago, I think, which was a great feeling.
Wow, that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it a pretty big project? Or you had a lot of subjects?
We had 45, so it was.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I'm dealing with like 10 to 15 per. I try to do 10 to 15 per study. 45 is a lot.
Yeah. Well, now, granted, we have 3 different subgroups within that, which is why we ended up with 45. But yeah, it was
great.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine with the. I don't know how it was at your university, but with at U of H, we were under the guidance of our administration to come up with new guidelines for cleaning our masks. I collect a lot of metabolic data in our lab, so we had to come up with new guidelines and using new special chemicals that are a lot more expensive. These things that I did not take into account in my budget. So
I got much more familiar with wearing a full-on N95, which is not that comfortable, but yeah. It was an adjustment for sure.
All right, well, thanks everybody for leaving the spatial chat. We'll give it maybe a little bit more time since I know we have people just keep coming. So maybe once it slows down, we'll get started here. All right, I guess it's maybe slowing down now. So we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. I'm Ajit Chowdhury, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm chair of the ASB Diversity Committee, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our panel discussion this evening. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. As we gather in this virtual space, we acknowledge that the ground beneath our feet is the ancestral and contemporary territory of Indigenous peoples, many of whom have been forced to leave for other lands. We want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical contexts that have and continue to affect the Indigenous peoples of this land. Specifically, the land that I'm standing on is the ancestral and contemporary territory of the Shawnee, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwe, and Cherokee peoples. I encourage you to explore the current impact of colonization and systemic oppression on the Indigenous peoples who were first to live upon the land where you now sit. One first step could be to learn which Indigenous peoples have lived in your location. You could look for organizations that support Indigenous peoples in your area to find out. You could visit your local historical center, or you could search at native-land.ca. Okay, so this evening, we're going to be discussing advocating for change in your environment with a panel that includes both early and advanced career faculty. We are recording the session for those who could not be here tonight, and we've got a great turnout. So thank you for being committed to changing your environment for the better, even at the end of a long day of Zoom and spatial chat. We do have it set right now that you can't unmute yourself. We will probably change that in a minute or two, but please use your raise hand feature so we can call on you to hear your question or comment, or type it in the chat. And if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, please send a direct message to me and I'll ask it on your behalf. I also encourage you to add your own pronouns to your name in Zoom if you wish. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. Nelson Glover is a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering at Ohio State University. He's a proud alum of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Chesapeake Bay Retriever. He's a co-founder of the OSU chapter of the Society of Black Graduate Engineers and our local leader of National Biomechanics Day events. So Nelson, take it away.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So first, thank you everybody for being here. And I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists today. And then we'll start with our first prompt, which will have some further introduction and then dive straight into our content. And as Ajit said, you can put your questions in the chat, raise your hand, and then we'll try to get those to the panelists as they come in. So first we have Dr. Coltman. She is an assistant professor at University of Canberra. Did I say that correctly? All right. We also have Dr. Li-Shan Chu, who is the professor and department chair at Iowa State University. And last but not least, we have Dr. Christopher Ariano, who is the assistant professor at University of Houston. And the first prompt that I'm just going to put out for all of our panelists to answer is please, you can further introduce yourselves and then describe a time when you advocated for change in your own environment and what drove you to advocate for change at that time.
Want me to go in the same order? Okay, so
Yeah.
Thank you, Nelson and Andrew, for the introduction. So I'm joining you from Ngunnawal country in Canberra, Australia. So my research background is breast biomechanics, so a very female specific area of biomechanics. And when I undertook my PhD, I was at the University of Wollongong under the supervision of Professor Julie Steele and Associate Professor Deirdre McGee. So I had a all-female supervisory panel, and our lab at the time was predominantly made up of female academics and students. So I appreciate that my experience is probably a bit different to many other students or early career researchers in biomechanics. So currently I'm in a more male-dominated lab in Canberra, but I'm also an early career researcher representative for the Australian New Zealand Society of Biomechanics. And in that role, I really focus on creating networking opportunities for early career researchers, but particularly females. And I'm also a member of the International Women in Biomechanics group. So Anna and Jay, who are the co-founders of that group, kindly invited me to participate in this panel today on behalf of the International Women in Biomechanics, and I'm really pleased to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation and for facilitating today's event. So I guess onto the question in terms of when I've advocated for change for women in my environment. And I would say that my entire research career to date as an early career researcher has been used to advocate for change for women. So I've used biomechanics as a tool to develop an evidence base upon which to inform that change. So instead of describing a specific time that I advocated for change, I wanted to speak to a few different examples of how I've done that through biomechanics. So my PhD was focused on developing evidence-based recommendations to improve breast support or sports bra design for women across the breast size and shape spectrum, but particularly women with large breasts who are currently undercatered for by current sizing and design. And this impacts these women's ability to be active and perform daily tasks. So by developing evidence and providing scientific data on breast size and shape of many women and how this changes with things like age and body mass, industry have greater evidence to inform their product development. They also have a social obligation to be inclusive of all shapes and sizes and not just young, smaller women. Additionally, during this time, I undertook my data collection from the lab and out into the community. So I visited a range of women's health centres to collect data and bring awareness to the importance of breast support and bra fit, and really raise and normalise the conversation around breasts and breast support. More recently, I've been working on developing female-specific body armour designs and sizes for Australian female military personnel. So in Australia, previous restrictions on female participation in combat roles were lifted in 2016. And with that, there's a need to ensure that the equipment issued to these soldiers and women actually fits them correctly. Now, this is a relatively new space, and it's a very male-dominated field, but women currently wear the exact same body armour systems that men wear, despite the substantial anthropometric differences in the torso. So this has been shown now to negatively affect their ability to complete their occupational roles. So by providing evidence to the extent of the problem, my work then advocates for changes to design and policy, ultimately to increase women's participation and inclusion in this male-dominated industry. A third example is that I'm also working with a team of early career female biomechanists and industry partners to develop a mentoring-based program whereby schoolgirls will be paired with real-life female biomechanics mentors to develop an interest in biomechanics and biomedical engineering to really bridge that gender gap that we know exists in engineering and ensure that we have a great representation of women in STEM, and particularly biomechanics. So if we want to see more women in leadership positions, particularly in biomechanics, we need to ensure that more girls are encouraged to enter the field and then retained post-PhD. So what really drives me then to advocate for change for women, whether it be through more inclusive product and equipment design, or through achieving gender equity and inclusion in occupational or educational settings, is a passion to create change for women and empower women to be anything they want to be. I enjoy working in this space. I feel like it gives me a purpose, and I also feel like there's really clear problems that need to be addressed. So sorry, my answer was quite long, but thank you.
We absolutely appreciate that. Next, we'll move to Dr. Chu.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Nelson. And thank you, Ajay, for your invitation. And it's an honor to be here to see everyone. And so, yeah, my name is Li Xuan Cho. I'm just like Nelson introduced, I'm currently serve as a department chair and a professor in kinesiology program here at the Iowa State University. So for myself, I still remember when Ajay sent me the email of the invitation, he said, because I satisfy 2 criteria. So that's why I'm here today. One is I came from other country and to pursue graduate degrees in the US. And secondly, I'm old enough to be classified as a senior investigator. Wow. I didn't realize it has been so long already. So that's why I don't want to tell you, yeah, how many years I've been in the US, but I came to US as an international student to pursue my graduate studies over here. And certainly I benefited a lot from my mentors during the PhD studies in Chicago, and Dr. Louis Dragonich, who actually was my doctoral study mentors. And certainly then I also had the opportunity to move on to Mayo Clinic to continue my postdoc training under Dr. Ken Kaufman. And certainly they are the people who make who I am right now. And so I will be here, sitting here to share with you my own experience. And then after that, I spent 19 years at the University of Oregon as a faculty member, all the way from very junior faculty and to become a very senior faculty over there. And the last few years over there, I also served as the department head in that department. And in 2019, I relocated to Iowa State University and also serve. They recruited me here to serve as a chair for the department. So just like Nelson said, the first problem is about talk about a time I advocated the change in my environment. I still remember when I first became the department head, and I heard a lot. When I was a faculty, I heard a lot of rumors already from among staffs, among faculty, and also among graduate students, talking about, there are occasions within their communications or in the environment of the department, which not making them very comfortable. And so when I first took the position as a department head, then I decided with this, it's more like to explore, what's really going on. So at that time, I was able to have the opportunity to initiate a department climate survey, which actually at that time was one of the first kind of task of this kind on that campus. So we were able to seek for the college funding and then hire a external consultant to do a climate survey within the department to help us understand how staff, faculty, and the graduate students kind of felt about their, the respectful workplace has been practiced in the department, and which also give them an opportunity to express their concerns about diversity, equity, inclusion, the challenges they encountered in the department. And actually, at that time, I heard rumors, but I was based on my own interactions with faculties and my observations, interactions with my colleagues in the department. Before I see the result from the survey, I was very confident. I mean, there was no incidents or no evidence about, irrespectful workplace. People feel well treated. But at the end, the numbers, the evidence shows something differently, and that's really shocked me at that time, because I think this is totally just a result of the implicit bias, because we continue to do what we have been doing, and we didn't really pay too much attention to, whether our behavior, our communications, or a movement of ours. How do other people feel about that at all? But by translating all of that into data, into numbers, really open up my eyes, and then later on we were able to work together within the department to come up with some action plans to allow us to hopefully to change the working environment within the department, and for allow the faculty, staff, and the faculty to move on and to feel better, to think that's a better for more enhanced environment for everyone. So that's kind of my experience. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing. And then we'll move on to Dr. Ariano.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for me, just a little bit of background. I come from a mechanical engineering background, and my PhD is in locomotion, biomechanics, energetics. And I started at University of Houston about 5 years ago. And really at that time, as a new professor, I didn't really understand the culture, the department, right? Everything was kind of new to me. So I think I spent the first year just trying to get accustomed to, the different levels of administration. As you know, as new faculty will realize, there's a lot of different groups, different faculty, and you have early faculty all the way up to full professors. So in my department, in particular, we have what's called a graduate research degrees committee, a GRD, and they are responsible. Essentially, the faculty that make up our department, we are responsible for making decisions about the PhD curriculum. And so for me, when I was going through grad school and the PhD, a lot of the programs were very, very structured in a way that students were, especially if you're in a PhD program, you were taking, or I guess you're required to enroll in about 20 to 25 hours of PhD coursework. And then you had the rest of the half of your curriculum was all dedicated to research. And I even know that in other places like the UK, PhD students don't even take that many courses. It's actually just all straight research. In our department, I felt that was very backwards. And it's okay, because I already told my department this, so if I get in trouble, it's okay, because I've made my feelings very, very strong and aware. But in our department, the way it was structured, it was 60 hours of coursework and then 6 hours of dissertation. And to me, it didn't make any sense, right? Because we have our PhD students coming in, spending so much time in the classroom and leaving little time to spend in the lab and doing research, right? Where you're really, really learning your craft and your field. So I pushed hard, especially not at the beginning, but maybe when I kind of got used to being in the meetings and speaking out. I said, I think one way that we can improve our program is by having a lot more time dedicated to research, right? So, okay, is there a way we can trim down the coursework and dedicate at least half of those hours to a PhD, or to the dissertation, to research? And so, at first there was some pushback toward that, but the way I kind of framed it and the way I was able to make change in the environment is to say, if we're going to compete, right? We're in Texas. We're going to compete with the big schools like UT Austin and the Texas A&M. Look at their programs. Look at how they're structured. And you can clearly see that their programs are really focused on research and spending time in the lab. So to me, I think that was a change that was made recently. It's kind of been slowly kind of coming around, but I think a lot of students are much more happier in the program and spend a lot more time being able to work on their research, right? Publish their papers, present at scientific conferences. And I think it helps the students, but it also helps professors, right? It helps our program to become stronger. So that's one particular instance, which I felt pretty strongly that I really want to help students and maximize their time when they're with us at U of H.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And I would say for all of those testimonials, really, that those are not only advocating for change, but really achieving, levels of change. So we thank you. So now, Ajit, have we had any questions come through? Well, no, I have some other questions that I'll actually ask. So now that you've described a time where you have advocated for change, there's a flip side, because like Dr. Ariana said, he didn't come right off the bat saying like, this is what I want to change in the department. He waited a few years. Can you describe a time when you maybe wanted to advocate for change, but something was holding you back, and sort of what those barriers were and how you were able to overcome them? And we can go in whatever order, whoever feels comfortable going first. Dr. Coleman.
Sure. So I was recently contacted by the mainstream media over telephone to comment on the fact that the Norwegian women's beach handball team had been fined for playing in bikini bottoms and getting a few head nods. So in the recent European tournament, so they instead wore mid-thigh length tights, which was in violation of the Handball Federation's uniform regulations. So this was in the media. I'm sure a few of you are quite aware of it. And a lot of people spoke out about this relatively outdated rule. But when I was contacted, I actually declined to make a comment in the media on the issue, as I felt it was a little bit outside my area of expertise. So although I work in female protective equipment, to date, that scope hasn't included sporting uniforms. And I wasn't across what the handball uniform policy was. Handball isn't a thing in Australia, but I do know what the female beach volleyballers wear, and it's quite a similar uniform. So after I reflected on this, I do feel outraged that they were fined when the necessity to wear a bikini, in my mind, doesn't serve a functional role, particularly given that the male counterparts are able to wear mid-thigh length tights and singlets. I don't see why women can't wear the same. But why then didn't I make a comment to the mainstream media about this and actually advocate for change for these women? And I believe the reason I didn't was that I didn't actually feel confident about speaking out about this issue. I was afraid on commenting on something that was a bit less about science and more about gender. And I think sometimes, particularly in academia, we can be crippled a little bit with paralysis of analysis, where we really overthink things and become crippled with fear of speaking about something that's even slightly outside our very narrow area of expertise. So ultimately, this meant that I became one less person to advocate for change for these women. And what would I do differently? Well, rather than declining to comment and ending the call and finishing it there, what I could have done was ask the journalist for the questions and a little bit of time to formulate a response. I could have then spoken to a colleague or the media unit at my university to prepare a response that I felt confident to deliver. And I do believe that I have enough expertise to comment in this space, even though it's slightly outside, my immediate expertise, and ultimately then advocate for change for women.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I shouldn't, well, due to my position as a department administrator, and and also due to my background of coming from Taiwan and or being an Asian, so I mean, for people like with a background like me and holding the administrator positions on campus is relatively small portion. So from time to time, I do get faculty with similar background come to me because they feel more comfortable talking to me about the challenges or the difficulty they are facing through their career development from other departments. And again, a lot of time, I kind of, after the conversation specifically talking about, I mean, how they could be mistreated or kind of a lack of recognition within inside the department and so on. And for me, the only thing at that time, I feel the only way I can recommend them is, well, you may have to voice for yourself. And maybe a better communication with your department chair would be important to kind of get your thought and get your feeling being known by your administrator. But from mostly, I also kind of know, yeah, this will be a very challenging task for those junior faculty as well, because they also keep deeply in their mind, because they are still going through the tenure system, tenure track process. They don't really want to, I mean, offend or even create any kind of conflict in between themselves and their administrators. And so sometimes I just feel it's kind of hopeless for me to be able to provide any other type of resolutions to really help these junior faculty members with the same kind of cultural background like myself. And at the same time, I feel I struggle to identify the best way to kind of help the faculty to get this message or this concern passing up to the administrators. And certainly at a later time, I also kind of learned about, I mean, their AMBA's office on campus, and I continue to recommend faculty members of this kind to discuss their issues, their conflict, and with that office. But the continued challenging to me is I think a lot of time for me being an Asian, we come from a culture which we try to be conservative, and we try to resolve the issues within our own our ways, and a lot of time we try to avoid kind of creating conflict. And this culture continue to kind of surrounding myself and my own faculty, my colleagues, and until this time. And although we are learning more and more about, I mean, being able to improve this kind of conversation in the department and on campus, but a lot of time I still feel the traditions and the cultures of where we came from continue to become a huge, not necessarily a barrier, but an obstacle for us to cross that bar and to be able to emerge ourselves into this new environment, and also to keep up with our mentality as well as our thinking process with the current development of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this kind of in these areas. Yeah. So I think this will be an ongoing challenge for people with a background like myself. Although we are learning from everyone like you in this area, but I think it's still there, and I will continue to be a challenge for us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then Dr. Ariana.
Yeah, I can say a few words. I would say for sure, from my perspective as a junior faculty, the power dynamics, the politics is definitely real. And anyone sitting up, that have been through all that through the faculty ranks knows that it could be can be very difficult as a junior faculty member to navigate some of these politics, right? Some of these key decisions that not only affect you, but affect the entire department, affect your students. But one particular example that I remember is my first 2 years, I was really having a hard time recruiting students. And as a new faculty member, I was, I'd get emails from students who were interested, and I was very excited. Like, oh wow, they want to come work with me. That's great. And but and then when we started talking, and I would try to talk to them about some of the their research interest and trying to understand whether we'd be a good fit. And a lot of the times, and I would say in two particular cases, I had 2 students that were great, but I could not offer them a very good package, a student package that came with a solid stipend and your commitment, right? And so these are some of the things that are really difficult for me to overcome, because I couldn't compete with other universities that were offering these same students full packages, right? And a research assistantship, things like that I couldn't compete. I didn't have a grant at that point. And so for me, it was very difficult because it took me some time to kind of get my program up and going, and to some of that research up and going. So I felt that it was very for me to try to recruit students that would be able to come and feel supported. I had to bring it up during the GRD meeting, and this is kind of a sticking point, right? Because you might have faculty within that group, that GRD group, that have funding, right? And the way that our structure was organized, that those professors who did have funding had a lot of the benefits, right? And sometimes if you're there for a while, right, if you're junior faculty, it's hard to compete, right, with these more senior faculty that might have funding already. But the way that I was able to, and it took me a couple of years, but the way that I was able to fight for change was to talk about, I think as a group, right, as an entire committee, as a faculty, we're going to keep having challenges recruiting competitive students and be able to compete with other universities if we cannot offer our students the same type of stipend and at least a 3-year commitment, right? As either given a TA-ship or research, as some type of research assistantship. So we're going to continue to lose out, and it's just going to make our program continue to suffer. And so I think when I framed it in that way, right, was that we're all going to suffer, right? The entire program, the department, that we need to have some change so that we can improve. I think that, that's when more people started to kind of understand and also advocate for that same change. So that's how I would frame it. I always try to think about, it's not just about me, right? But how about the entire department? How about the rest of the faculty? How can we all kind of improve so that we all benefit from this, right? Faculty and the students.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that, because I do think it's really important to always put it in perspective, right? It's not just you advocating for change for yourself, but for other people as well. So now I'm going to turn to some of the questions. The first one I'm going to go to is from Kristen Zhao. This one piggybacks off of what Dr. Chu just said, and then we'll go to Kayla's question. So Kristen said, thanks, Lishan. I appreciate that individuals with different backgrounds are challenged by the power differential in academia. It is a challenge for those of us raised here as well. How can we help advocate for junior faculty in these situations?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of always the questions to us. But again, I think for people like us, we went through a few kind of bad experience in the beginning of our career development, and for myself, what the strategy I'm using is, through my career, certainly I experienced most of excellent mentors, but there were also times I have struggled with my advisors as well. So what I did, through this process, is I try to. But again, they are all my mentors. They are all my teachers. So even though there are some different behavior or opinion, I may not agree, but I still what I learned from them is I try to make myself a note. This is a kind of behavior I should not repeat. I should not impose to my colleague, to my students. when I become a mentor. Okay, so right now I do have the opportunity to become, serving as a department chair. So that's kind of what I myself try to do is I try to understand what the struggle, I try to kind of remember what the struggle I had as a graduate student, as a junior faculty. And then I try to avoid imposing those challenges or conflict to them as they develop their career in academia. So to me, the best strategy for myself is communication. So every time when I hire a new faculty to the department, a junior faculty to the department, I have a long communication with them to share with them, what are our expectations. But again, what I emphasize to them is, what we are looking for is a faculty, not just a PI, not just a scientist. What we are looking for is a faculty who can serve as an excellent mentor to the new generations, right? And a faculty who can be a colleague, a collegial to the people around in the department, can be a contributing members to the department. And certainly this person need to be an excellent scientist as well. And try to make sure the communication channels between at least myself as a department chair and also the junior faculties or even the graduate students is open. They don't feel any kind of power struggles between themselves and mine. But again, sometimes this kind of power struggle authority gap is still there because they won't share with me with anything. So a lot of time, I also turn to my staff to help me as well. Do they observe any rumors within the department or anything which can kind of draw their concerns, and they can serve as my ears and eyes in the department, and to allow me to pay attention as well. So again, I think it's a very kind of a frank communication between myself and the junior faculty, or even with the graduate student, and to clearly indicate what are our expectations, and then to share with them my own experience as well. How do I kind of moving through this career path, and treat them not just a colleague, and I'm hoping it will become a as well. Yeah, so that's how I approach the how do I to kind of to advocate for junior faculty in this kind of academic development.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question comes from Kayla Seymour, and she asks, can you talk about finding an ally in times when you are in the minority on creating change, particularly an ally of a different status, gender identity, and or racial ethnic identity? How did you go about finding these allies within different power dynamics in academic and work environments?
I can talk about that one. I can respond to that one. In my experience at U of H, I would say I didn't find an ally. It kind of happened in kind of a, I don't know. It was kind of just happened because I actually built a meaningful relationship with this person, and I would say, young PhD students, postdocs, junior faculty. I think one of the important things that I've learned is really trying to build meaningful relationships with people, right? Within your department, whether your colleagues, right? Other professors in our departments, right? So sometimes, at least in my case, I was very caught up in my own little bubble at first. And I would say I probably spent the first 2-3 years just in my own little bubble. I didn't really talk to anybody because I was so consumed with trying to get my research going, had kids, and it's a bunch of craziness, right? A bunch of craziness. So, but then I realized, you know what, I need to, as Dr. Chu has mentioned, right? Being a faculty member is more, at least more about, is more than research. it's really trying to get to know your department, right? What their goals are, your other faculty members, right? What kind of research they're interested in. And I think that, right, really being invested and being sincere about these relationships, right? And trying to understand what your colleagues do, right? And get to know them, get to know their families, right? Their struggles. I think that's where you build those relationships, right? And you build those allies over time, right? Because they can help you in difficult situations, right? And a lot of things that happens between faculty and decisions that are made, a lot of times are through the back door, through other conversations, right? Not in the big table. So those, when people are invested in you and they care about you, right? They're really gonna try to look out for you, and vice versa, right? Same with me. If I care about you and I know you, right, I'm gonna try to help you if I can, right? Whether I'm a junior faculty or not.
Yeah.
Sorry, I second definitely what Chris has said there in terms of personal relationships. So I think there's having allies, yeah, that, and talking about your same gender or women, there's some great groups that you can do that. But to have allies, particularly of the opposite sex or in a different culture or diversity group, is very important. And particularly having men and senior men, they can be great champions of your work and open doors for you that may not have been possible, particularly as an early career researcher. Mm-hmm. So I think that a really good way to get access to an ally is to have a mentor, and we speak to these personal relationships. They get to know you, they get invested in you, and they want to help you. And I identified someone that I thought would be a helpful mentor and collaborator for me. And so I just went and asked that person to mentor me. And this has now led to a research relationship with this person, but also they're a very senior person and they're invested in me. So they think of me for things and put me forward. And I think that's really important in allyship.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Chris and Celesta talk about. But to me, another kind of way to find the ally is to also let people recognize you are the one who care about them as well. Okay, and they will feel the same way when they are in the same situation. You will become their ally as well. So I think that this kind of a mutual respect, and also always put yourself in other people's shoes when you come to discuss an agenda, and don't jump to a conclusion right away, because a lot of time it's very difficult for us to kind of to agree upon a new agenda or a new suggestions, and we sometimes can be very defensive. But what I have learned is, don't jump to the conclusion. Do make a judgment and slow kind of digest what you have heard, you have observed, and then to think about how will that play in the environment and so on, and allow you to find a better way to respond. So if you can do this to your colleague, I believe eventually they will respond to you in a mutual way as well. So I think not just don't look for allies, but also every day in your department, in your research group, be an ally to your student, to your colleague, and to your administrator as well.
All right, I'm going to jump in here with a question that came into me. Okay, so I'm just going to read it. It's great to hear how you have each advocated for change individually. However, often, particularly early in one's career, some people have found it can be easier to find senior allies or sponsors that champion change on your behalf or help you advocate for change. Can any of you discuss how you determine when to take on a problem yourself versus finding allies to work with?
Well, maybe I can start. I think that's one of the reasons. Well, I hope there are no colleagues from my institution. that's one of the reasons drove me to serve as a department head, is because I feel only if when I in that position, I can make an impact and I can make a change to rectify what I feel should be rectified, and there should be a greater, better for the department. So that's, at least that's my experience. Not only, that's kind of what I also said earlier, don't just looking for someone to come in to help you. A lot of time you have to proactively to help someone else as well. And that for me to kind of to direct myself into the administration role, actually one of the reasons was because I think this is one of the way I can better direct my working environment to a greater benefit to my colleagues and to my students.
I think for me, it's about confidence. If I feel confident enough to address the issue or advocate in myself, then I will do that. It's at times when I feel unsure or I feel like I need help, that then I would look for that senior ally or someone that might be able to help me in that situation.
In my case, just to speak on that for a few minutes, I was having some issues in my department with, during the COVID pandemic. I was at home with my kids, virtual schooling. And, when you're a new faculty member, if you end up going to university, you're going to start a package, usually get a timeline to spend that money. So in my specific example, during the COVID pandemic, we were allowed to extend that clock to spend that money. And we're in the middle of the pandemic, got 2 kids at home, virtual schooling. I'm trying to teach 2 classes, do research. And it totally slipped my mind that I forgot to ask for this extension. So I lost quite a bit of some startup money, which was very hard, because that really limited me in terms of what I could buy and do from that point on. But so at that point, I was gonna leave it alone. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it alone, and I'm not gonna ask for it, because it was already about 3 or 4 months that I realized that I screwed this up. I made a big mistake, and so I think it was just a matter of confidence, right? Just really a matter of owning up to my mistake. But then I had a conversation with one of my mentors, a senior faculty. She's a woman, and she's kind of one of those allies that just kind of have, over the years has just helped me out and really has looked after me in terms of, how I'm doing, or, is there any way she could help, right? And this and that. So in this particular instance, she said, you know what, you can ask, and so I talked with some other people up at the higher administration. They're like, well, it doesn't hurt to ask, just you send an email, tell this person what the situation was. And so I finally got up the guts to email this person and went through the whole story. Long story short, I was denied. I was still denied, right? But I felt that, at least I went through that process, and eventually, right? I mean, because, before this, right, keep in mind, I asked my chair, and the chair was like, it's probably not gonna happen. I asked my dean, he's like, it's probably not gonna happen, but you could ask, right? So I went through all the levels, and then went up to the top person, right? The top person who can make the final decision, and was still denied. But you know what? I was like, it's fine. It was ultimately my mistake. I'm gonna own it. But I have no regrets, right? I don't want to keep wondering one day as to, right, whether I should have asked or I shouldn't have, this and that. So at least I know it's a clear answer, my mistake. But it was very costly. But along that, through that process, right, I was actually able to build more allies, right, up the chain of the administration, right? For example, the provost, right, people connected to the provost, right, people in the division of research, right? So maybe not the best way to do it, but at least they know my name, and right, and at least I know people and what decisions they can make, right, in the future. where if I get stuck in a certain situation, right, I could ask for help in this case. So maybe not the best example of how to navigate these situations, but I didn't really have anything to lose at this point. It was, I was like, hey, it's quite a bit of money. I don't want to lose it. I did end up losing it, but at least I know, right? I tried every avenue possible.
So we have another question that I have to ask, but I just want to follow up, on this, but what everybody said here, if you have the confidence, you feel confident bringing it up, bring it up. If you don't let it go. Don't let it lie. Go to your mentors. I think that's what everybody's saying, getting help from mentors to try to bring it up on your behalf. The other thing I want to point out about what Chris said is an atrocity. I don't know. I'll just say that. I guess it's being recorded. I shouldn't be unprofessional, but that didn't happen. But something that might happen might be that all those people along the chain say, you know what? We should think about whether we should change this policy. And that would not have happened if Chris had said, no, I'm just going to let it go and not bring it up, right? So I think that's important. Lishan, did you want to add something to that?
No, I just, because after I hear Chris's story or a lesson, I felt, because we experienced the same thing as well, right? How to handle a junior faculty startup package and their durations. And so we continue to hear no answers from the administrators, but fortunately, at least on this campus, we were able to convince the administrators they should extend the duration of the startup, and then at the end, the administrators agreed to do so. So I think what Chris you have done is what I will encourage the junior faculty, and I will be in support with the junior faculty to voice this is the right way to do. But certainly, you understand that, I mean, we are not the one making the final decision. But for me, as a person to side with the junior faculty, to support their voice, to let their voice to be heard by the administrator, whether it doesn't matter what the outcome will be like, but I think at least I feel that's something I need to do, and at the same time, I become one of the team members with my colleagues and my faculty.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, I don't have any animosity toward U of H. They've been extremely helpful. Really, it was my own fault. I didn't keep up with my timelines, but this is also a very valuable mistake, right, that I've taken with me, so that if I ever have a chance to mentor a young faculty member that's in my same shoes, that's one of the things I would tell them, right? Hey, you got to keep track of your startup packages, the timelines, the dates, right? You really got to keep on top of that, because that's money that is, once you lose it, you can't get it back. So costly lesson, right? But hopefully I can pass that on to someone else, right, after me.
And it's awesome to hear you guys talk about this, because I feel like as a graduate student, I have very often made lots of mistakes, and I've had to turn to Ajit to advocate on my behalf. And that's how I met half of the people at Ohio State. So I made a lot of my allies by doing that exact thing.
Okay, so we have another question here, interesting question. So have any of the panelists encountered an environment where they were advocating for change when the leadership of the environment is directly impeding change? Is that when you get a group of like-minded individuals and advocate? How do you do this without being perceived as undermining leadership?
That's an extremely tough one right now. I mean, so I'm in Texas, so we're fighting leadership all the way up to the governor, okay, who doesn't want to require masks, and we're about to go back to school with full capacity, right? Obviously, I can only control what I can do, what I do. So my plan is to wear a mask. I'm fully vaccinated, wear a shield. But I think a lot of faculty are concerned because, especially a lot of the younger faculty, we have children that are not yet vaccinated. And so there's a big risk, right, for us to be on campus with a lot of other students and potentially, getting COVID and passing it to our kids that are not vaccinated. So that's a very difficult situation to be in. I don't know how we go about that, right? I mean, do we rally the troops, the faculty, and protest, right? I mean, put all our jobs at risk, and because this really doesn't. U of H has to follow the guidelines set by the governor, right? They can't say no. We're actually going to mandate. We're going to have a mandate mask policy, et cetera, et cetera. So some of these things it's really difficult to try to fight because this can go up all the way to the state level. Right, we have very little power in that case. So I don't know how to. Right now, we're stuck. I don't know how to fight that. It's a very difficult situation to be in.
Yeah, I feel again, fight may not be the very right word to use as the in communication with administrators. So, but I still believe. Communication, okay, and again, for my role as a department chair, what I try to make sure my dean understand the contribution being made by my faculty in the department. But at the same time, I also need to communicate to my faculty what are the guidelines and the policies and the resources can be made available from the administrators, and then what will be the constraint for our job performance here in the department. So to me, the key word will be communication. We communicate with them, but then again, I totally agree with Chris because we are experiencing a similar governor as well in the state of Iowa, but we may not be able to reach there. But I think we should have the courage to voice out what we believe is the right opinion and based on the science, for example, or based on the evidence, and continue our effort to communicate. And as I said, the small example was like you talk about the startup extension, because one person ask may not be, or the individual faculty request, the outcome may be negative, but when that is eventually cited by the chair and the dean, and it will certainly make the vice president for research understand that's the right way to do. So I think we just, regardless of what's the outcome look like, I think we just need to continue to communicate, and because, and also to understand their constraint as well in making their decision. So and then try to kind of meet both sides in the middle, and hopefully you find a happy ending for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I am actually a part of a research institute, an affiliate member, but the whole lead group on the research institute, which is made of about 7 staff members, is male. So we talk about when we're recruiting new people to those positions, the need for there to be gender diversity in that recruitment process. And our university has a policy around achieving 50-50 by 2025. So I think with new hires that have come through, and as those processes or those positions are advertised, it's really about persistently raising the issue and the fact that there needs to be some change and building allies in the space, particularly people in more senior roles, to continue to advocate for change and not just leave it as it is because it's always been that way, or it's easier to leave it that way.
All right, thank you. I think we're going to return back to some of the questions we've had in the public chat. So the next one comes from Rebecca Bueller. Less than 2% of STEM doctorates are earned by students who identify as someone with at least one disability. So how have you or your department promoted positive change to create an equitable and accessible learning environment, specifically within the field of biomechanics?
I can talk to this. So I think visibility is very important. And I think universities now are starting to build more inclusive designs. But we actually had a blind student participate in biomechanics as an undergrad, and who's subsequently gone on to undertake a PhD. And obviously biomechanics is observing and explaining human motion. So I think it's very important that we were able to create and facilitate an environment that enabled him to learn and achieve the learning outcomes and the unit objectives, and also support him by having altered learning programs or activities to assist him. So we had a support student that helped him, and there were some changes to some of the things that he was learning.
Yeah, up to this point, I do not have any kind of real life experience in my position to encounter this scenario, but this is part what I learned from the younger generation, I mean, through my daughter. She is a student in architecture, and one of her passion is to design, I mean, buildings which can accommodate not only gender, but also disability and so on. And she even record a lot of podcasts interviewing with leaders in the architecture field to promote female architect in the field, as well as to accommodate different individuals with disabilities. So through the conversation, what I learned a lot is I tended to use, due to my kind of poor English skill, a lot of times I said, oh, this person is, I feel very unfortunate for this person who, for example, is disabled. And she corrected me right away, says, no, you should not use the word unfortunate, okay? They are themselves, okay? There's nothing wrong with them. And what we need to do is we have to treat them as just any one of us. And then what we have to do is to present, to accommodate the need, and then to see what we can do to allow that person to excel in the field. So at least that's kind of what I'm learning. Although I don't have any specific or kind of example I can use, but at least if I do encounter a situation like this is something what I may be doing, is to seek for any assist. I mean, to provide any ways we can accommodate to allow us to understand the qualifications, the excellence of this individual, and to foster this person's career development or academic development.
All right, Dr. Ariana, I think you had started to unmute yourself at one point. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I would just say that I don't have any experience at the PhD level. I do have experience with mentoring undergraduate students when I was a PhD student. So I've worked with students from all different backgrounds, African American, Mexican American, women. So in some cases, in one particular student, I did have a student with a speech impediment, and to me, I really spent a lot of time helping that student be comfortable with that, right? Practicing their presentations, being able to be more comfortable talking in front of people, because it was a very big struggle, and it was a big struggle, right? When you're not only trying to learn research, but then also trying to express yourself, right? And to express science and communicate. So for me, I felt it was very important for him to be comfortable speaking in front of me, right? And being okay with the process, right? And just being comfortable with himself, right? And over time, he would get better, and got better and got better. And now he's already he got his medical degree and is doing residency and is doing amazing things. And I think that those particular instances, right, I try to understand, what I can do to help this person achieve their goals. And that might mean spending extra time with them, right? Being having those tough conversations and saying it's okay, right? I understand that this might be difficult now, but we're going to overcome this, and we're going to make it to weakness, but we're going to make it a strength, right? We're going to practice, right? Because we all start from that position. Maybe some people are more comfortable in front of groups, right? But for me, when I started speaking in front of people, it was very, very, very difficult, right? Very nervous, a lot of anxiety, things like that. So for me, it was very important to understand that this was an extra challenge, right, for this student, and recognizing that and helping them, and not dismissing it, right? Not trying to dismiss it, but owning it and trying to help and make this student better, and turn into a strength.
Yeah, and I think importantly, what Chris, to Chris's point now, is also asking them what you can do to help, rather than just assuming or being uncomfortable to ask. But yeah, Chris spoke about, working with them. So ask them how you can help them, and then go about helping them.
All right, so our next question comes from Karen Troy. She says, I think one barrier we all face is time spent versus the reward. Can you talk about how we can effectively position efforts that increase diversity and inclusion so that the university, department, and promotion and tenure committee recognize that these are important and were undertaken at the expense of other activities, such as grant writing or other things?
Well, I would say for my experience, I don't know. It's difficult to answer that question, because I feel for me, I'm at where I'm at because I had people help me, and I've always been passionate about helping students like myself, my similar background, right? So if I got to put in the extra time, it's got to be on the weekends or whatever, right? I'm going to do it. If I can help students that come from a third ward, Houston, right, that don't see a scientist like me up in front of the board, right, or giving a talk about science, then I'll do it, because those 30 minutes, that 1 hour can have a huge impact on a young kid, right, and get them thinking like, oh, it'd be kind of interesting, right, or fun to become a scientist and do what Dr. A is sitting up there talking about. So for me, if I have a chance to try to inspire the next generation, I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter if it takes extra time, it takes a couple hours from my sleep, I'll do it. But also, in a very smart way, kind of tangible way, recently when I did apply for an NSF career, I made that part of my education plan, right? I showed NSF that I'm very invested in this community, and I'm going to do my best, right, to integrate what I do as a scientist with what they can learn, right, in the community. So being able to integrate that research plan with the educational plan, right, the outreach plan, for me, it just made a lot of sense, right? And it made sense in terms of an NSF career proposal. So, right, and so then with that proposal, right, and the funding that comes with it, now I can say, hey, to my department chair, to my dean, like, hey, I was able to get a grant, and I get funded to do what I love to do, right? So to me, I was kind of lucky in that sense, but I figured out a way to try to make that, to bridge those two worlds for me, right? It took time, and again, right, it took time to build those relationships with the with Alice Valdez, right, who's the person who founded this organization in Houston. So, getting to know her, getting to know her staff, right, and talking about ideas and working with their students. It all took time. But I guess for me, I never really had to kind of an in-plan or a kind of the end goal in mind. I think just one day I said, hey, you know what, I can actually, tie this in as an outreach educational plan and integrate the research with the education. And it kind of all just happened in that case. So I don't know, it took a long time to get there. But I don't know, one day I just kind of had this aha moment, and it kind of just happened. So.
I agree with Chris. I believe this is, we are in a very kind of interesting time to talk, because this is the time for the past few years, we encountered a lot of, national event and so on. So it kind of raised our awareness about the diversity, equity, inclusion. But But at the same time, we also have to recognize this should be human nature, right? This is something should be implanted into in our mind all the time. We should treat everyone equally. There should be no differentiation between who you are by any means. But again, that's because we grew up in a society which made us who we are right now. And right now we are more like we are taking a kind of doing something like a painkiller. We try to find a way, right, to rectify our own behavior and to try to force us to the right direction. It takes some time to get there, but then education is the key to teach. We should not be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion at this time when we are all junior faculties or graduate students in college. All of this should start from K to 12, elementary school, okay? Because we have to teach them how to be a good human being and to respect to each other. And so I think we are on there. I think, and a lot of time what we are doing, yeah, in the job application statement, that right now the administrator wants us to put a diversity statement there, training promotion package. But I think it's not really matter about what kind of statement you are putting there. Right now it's by formality. I think the most important thing is we have to grow that concept in our mind and then pass down to our generation, next generation. And eventually we will not this kind of guidelines and the regulation to regulate us to our behavior anymore. So I'm hoping, as the time continue on, right now we are kind of doing a very kind of intensive education to help us to rectify our course. But I'm hoping as the time continue on, this kind of characteristic, this kind of nature is born with us, because all the way from the moment a child is born, through the family, through the education, this is something been implemented into them, and then to guide their behavior down the road. Yeah.
I strongly agree with that. I think things aren't necessarily always treated as equally in terms of how you're rewarded in academia. And you could also think about, the time spent writing the grant versus the not getting it and the reward there. So I think really, if you believe in it and you're passionate about it and it aligns with your moral compass or your personal ethics, then you'll always find the time to work on it. Just like you will that really exciting research project that you want to do, but you might not have the capacity to do. If you love it, you'll do it. You'll find the time.
I want to just chime in here that we are going to talk more about positioning efforts that increase diversity and inclusion, as well as positioning efforts we've taken over the last 16 months relative to COVID at the Women in Science session on Thursday evening. So Karen and anybody else who wants to, come, and if you weren't planning on coming to that session, you should come to that session.
All right, wonderful. So the next question is a bit of a follow-up. So I think some of you guys have already talked about, maybe address this to some extent. So if you want to add, please do. Safir Siddiqui asked, as discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion come to the forefront of our academic disciplines, how can we ensure that faculty of color, particularly junior faculty, are not disproportionately being asked to serve in diversity committees and initiatives, especially if they're not equitably being asked to serve in research and pedagogy adjacent committees? So we did have a lot of comments about, you'll find the time, but at certain times, it could also be overwhelming, at least from what I hear. So what are some of your strategies for not becoming overtasked?
I would say that I've learned to say no to a lot of things, and be very particular about saying yes to certain committees that I was really felt that I would be able to help and be able to have a voice in, right, to make those decisions. So so I think for me, I try to balance out for particular pre-tenure, just committees within my department usually tend to be smaller, right? It depends on your institution, but I was told, avoid the external committees like outside your department before you get tenure, because those take a lot more time. So I've tried to maintain my commitments within a department, and then also things that I'm passionate about, right? Things that I kind of have control and ownership of, things that I can develop on my own. So that's where I kind of focus my effort. And then also in terms of my lab, right, I also focus my energy on recruiting students of color, women. So I've been very fortunate to have students come into my lab, being undergrads and helping them. And there's a question about energy, right? How do you keep your energy when things might seem a little slow? For me, it's really my students to give me the energy to keep going, because I love to see them grow as scientists, right? They come in not knowing very much, and then every day or every week, I'm challenging them, and we're working together, and they're improving and learning, and they're just, and they're doing amazing things, right? And so to me, though, every little step, right, every little growth that happens to me is very exciting, right? And to me, that kind of keeps me going, and excited, and keeps me waking up in the morning, right? Just being lucky to be in this position. I mean, we're very lucky, right? To be able to do science, right? Wake up in the morning and ask questions and be able to answer things that we're very passionate about. I mean, we're in a very, very unique position. So for me, I'm just grateful, right? It's not too many of us can wake up and say, hey, I love my job, and I love just getting up and thinking about what I'm going to do next, right? Like, what are we going to tackle next in the lab, or what ideas do we have? So that to me is just very exciting.
Yeah, from my viewpoint, actually, I had a few kind of discussion with administrator on this specific agenda, kind of over laboring minority faculties to serve, because to be a representative in all different kind of committees. So from my viewpoint, the administrators, they totally recognize this kind of phenomena, and I think people are trying to find a way to rectify this. At the same time, so I think it has to work out through the individual faculties within the department, just like Chris said. If you are overwhelmed by all the committee work, then just simply say no. And certainly, as a department chair, every year I arrange the committee assignment to all my faculties. And fortunately, for the two institutions I have served so far, also have shared the same kind of similar culture to protect junior faculties from service work. And because we truly recognize the career development, especially the research development, is one of the priority for them. So again, as I said, for the two institutions I've served so far, there's a commonality in this. We try to protect the junior faculty regarding, what colors or ethnic group and so on the person is. So to me, it's not the administrator have to do something. I think your colleague, the faculty member in the department has to recognize service as is equally important, or it's also another very essential element to the operation of the department. Okay, and it's not just certainly pursuing the grant is important, but again, what makes us as a department is we are in this big family. If one group of people is devoting their effort in reaching out to seek grant fundings, and you also want to foster the career development of the junior ones, then certainly the senior ones has to act in I mean, to cover this kind of responsibility. And I think this is the culture you have to develop within your department in order to be able to share the responsibilities. So to me, it's not just what the administrator need to do. I think the culture, develop this kind of culture, this family-like culture in the department is quite important.
Yeah, so this very specific example, I guess, is currently happening at my institution. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are the traditional custodians of Australia, there's a big push at our university and around the country, but particularly at our university, to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander pedagogy and teaching tools and resources actually embedded in the curriculum. So each of our faculties are being tasked with, in the next year or so, that this now needs to be part of the curriculum. So of course, with that, we need representatives from each of the disciplines that make up the faculties to serve on these committees and bring this information back. And in my discipline, there's one Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person. So when these things happen, everyone looks to him to join the committees as the representative. And I think a big problem is that there's not enough Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people employed in universities, such that there's not enough of them to actually join these committees. But secondly, everyone else is too afraid of saying the wrong thing or not knowing how. It's a big thing in Australia among non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So I think there's two things to address this. One, which was spoken about, is that, the leadership need to appreciate that there needs to be the division of labour on these committees sort of spread between the faculty staff. So it's about tapping the right people on the shoulder to say, this would be a good opportunity for you, or I think you could step up here. But it's also to the rest of us to actually educate ourselves, to feel confident enough to serve on these panels and be involved.
All right, thank you for that. So we have a few more questions in the chat. The next one is from Dr. Zhao, and I think this is a follow-up from her original question, asking how do we encourage leaders to support and align with their teams, staff, and faculty? I appreciate Li Shan's examples, but I'm not sure that it's typical.
I think this has also been touched on a bit before around the culture. I think it's very important, the culture that you create in your faculty and amongst your team. And I appreciate that at different institutions or in different departments in the same institution, there's very different culture. So yeah, I believe, and that starts from the top down, the leadership creating that culture and working with the staff to build a culture. But I think that's very important.
Yeah, I agree with Cresta. It's culture, but again, I think you a lot of time that's why I emphasize about building your own department culture. If you embrace this, then influence the other department, then eventually you will be propagating through to the administrator chain, and then to make the change. It's not an easy task. Okay, that's why we are still here and in discussing all of these agendas. And so I'm hoping, and also, I think many of you kind of noticed I changed my virtual background a little bit already. So I'm hoping, because this kind of discussion, diversity, equity, inclusion, I think in the US, we are at the forefront of this agenda. But I'm begging you and hoping you to share your experience and bring these seeds to the rest of the world. So I noticed Dr. Jill McNiff-Gray is also in the audience, who is also a leading expert in these areas. So I'm one of the person in charge of the World Congress on Biomechanics next year in Taipei, Taiwan. And I'm hoping all of you can kind of suggest us what we should do to be able to continue to our effort in disseminating these seeds we foster in this country and to the rest of the world, and especially for many of you who are the leading expert in the field. So to me, this is how we do to continue our effort and to communicate. And but we also understand it's not something we can reach the goal line shortly. We have to continue our effort. But the most importantly is our next generation. They will bear with this concept from the time they were born, hopefully, and then they won't need all of this discussion anymore. Yeah.
If I can make a little comment here, to Kristen's question, I think one tack that you could try as part of your argument, whether it's you or you and allies trying to encourage leaders, is to go back to the mission. What is the mission of the organization? Is there a part of the mission that talks about equity and inclusion? Is there a part of the mission that talks about excellence? How is, if there's a policy that's not supporting that mission, can you use that, the mission-based argument as part of that? I have had success with that over the last couple of years. So that's not like the only thing, but something you can add in that leaders might be responsive to.
All right, so we have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to try to squeeze in these last few questions, but I do think we're able to go a little bit over, if I'm not mistaken. So the last few questions in the chat come from Caitlin Banks, and then sort of followed up by Matt Whitstein. The pace of institutional change can feel incredibly slow. How can we maintain hope when we know we're looking at a long journey towards change, but we needed results yesterday? And then Matt added, how can we, or how do you maintain energy, when you know that it's a really long journey?
Great question. And I think that really some of these things can take generations. Like you look at different occupations or different industries, and it takes generations for there to be change. So yeah, we needed change yesterday, but the reality is that it might take a really long time. So I think if you just continue, if it's something you believe in, you've got the energy and you'll have the energy, but you also just want to think of the future generations of the students that you're teaching and how it might be different for them. Even my own supervisors, how their environment was different now to my environment. So I think through each generation, there'll always be change, and you want to ensure that that's going to be positive. So you want to do your bit to make it positive.
Yeah, I agree. It's a slow progress, but for myself, I have noticed a lot of improvements, enhancement for the past, well, unfortunately, I probably have to say decades. But compared to when I was a graduate student, I did notice a lot of mistreatment going on over at that time. But
I think he might have frozen a little bit. We're just about at 8 o'clock. So, of course, we can
for administrators, it's also part of the education as well. So I think we just need to be persistent, just like when we are pursuing grant funding, right? One failure, that doesn't mean anything. We have to continue to communicate with them and to share, to collectively, to have our collective voice. Yeah, and I believe, yeah, one time, two time, and eventually we are going to improve the whole environment, especially the academia, and also the society, the country.
And then I'd also just like to touch on things a little bit, as I took over coordinating National Biomechanics Day at Ohio State, one of the things that I was really passionate about was bringing in students from underrepresented, particularly African-American backgrounds. And I feel like even having them in, those little wins help energize me in particular, and I feel like people around me. So finding those things that actually give you energy in those long journeys. Of course, my journey has not quite been as long, but I feel like just even at sort of an early point, those are the things that keep me wanting to do more. And now, we're a little bit past 8 o'clock. We can stay here for a little bit longer if people continue to have questions. But first, I just want to give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. Silent round of applause, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Nelson, for facilitating, and thank you, Ajit, for the kind invitation. It's been very, very informative and just very helpful to hear others' perspectives.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, so I think maybe we will say goodnight because I think people are starting to drop off and it has been a long day and it's only the first day of the conference. Let's pace ourselves. But I do want to remind everybody, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have our Women in Science session, and we have some different speakers, some different activities, but really going to be thinking about the pandemic and its effects on people in academia, especially women, and really focusing on what we can do to try to advocate for change, but also coming back to some of the points that people were making, really take stock of what we have done. All of us who've been in academia, whether you're a student or a faculty member or a staff member, have moved mountains over the last 16 months, right? And we should get credit for that, and we should take credit for that. So we're going to talk a lot more about that on Thursday. So with that, thanks everybody. And oh, Chris, you want to say something?
No, just want to say thank you and have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Nelson.
Everyone. Yep. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ajit. Thanks, Chris and LaShawn.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.